Welcome everyone to the May 2024 Talga Group Quarterly Investor Webinar. Today we'll hear a presentation from Talga's Managing Director Mark Thompson about the group's recent updates. Following Mark's presentation, there will be a Q&A. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question ahead of time. You can also submit a question during the presentation through the Q&A function on Zoom. We've received quite a few questions as usual, so if we don't get to your question, feel free to get in contact with us after the webinar at info@talgagroup.com. I now welcome Mark Thompson, Managing Director of Talga Group. Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Alex, and hello everyone, wherever your time zone is around the world. This is our usual quarterly webinar. We have probably focused this one a little bit more on the actual updates, so we're trying to be more relevant to, I guess, the period as such that was covered by the quarterly. Of course, we'll delve into much larger strategic things during that and events, but also in the question time, which is quite extensive. So I am trying to allow for a lot of time for that. So let's get rolling. If you're a shareholder, you're already aware that we are a company that specializes in battery materials mostly, but also all sorts of advanced materials based on usually graphitic carbon, but also we can incorporate silicon and some of the next generation type materials. There is a separation that I think is not understood well, where the Vittangi anode project, which is our primary project we're developing at the moment, is a project that utilizes some of our tech. It involves our mine and resource all the way through to the anode, fully coated anodes for selling to battery makers. However, that is a project within the company which has other projects as well. Our silicon anode projects, we've got different products like recycled anode materials now that we're working on, and of course graphene products as well. So I'll touch base on some of those other products in the company. As you know, there's essentially, we are like an industrial chemical company that way, of which the Vittangi project is our first major project, but there are others to come as well. So just a bit of background context for the main driver of the lithium-ion battery market, which has been driving the changes in the graphite anode market, has been mostly all around passenger EVs. They're the largest volume. The growth has actually continued to be very strong. If you look back at actual figures, for 2023, you're still up 30%. Frankly, in a lot of commodities and businesses around the world, at a time of great recessionary imperatives arising from increases in interest rates, etc., and various global deglobalization aspects that are happening, you've got continued electrification of transport, electrification of everything from cars, trucks, buses, ferries. It's not just all about passenger EVs and light vehicles and things. It's all sorts of things. And never forget, this doesn't include things like stationary storage as well. So the strategic decision to be involved in the lithium-ion battery supply chain is essentially underwritten by this continued shift, which, while retail numbers may go up and down, there's actually a seasonal drop every time around Q4, which the numbers in the media get jumped on in Q1 of 24. The reality is things continue to grow really well, and there's just a general uptrend. I think forecast growth for this year is varying a lot, but it's still up around 25+%. So as I said, there's not many aspects of any global economic trend in the world that's got that sort of growth, and so we're still very comfortable being in this area, so that's looking good. Potential anode supply deficit, I know some people may, again, that will clash with what they've been reading about in the media. Certainly there's been a lot of capacity for synthetic graphite anode being built in China. What's recently come out is some information that as of January, you had capacity utilization was down to half, and by towards the end of the quarter, it was up to about 70–75% utilization. This is just the Chinese anode manufacturers, or the synthetic, mostly anode manufacturers there, and the larger manufacturers are at 90%. So by the time we're heading into Q2, you're actually heading into a situation where it had gotten tight. And we've got news that groups like CATL have started buying again in large scale, and they see things coming up and prices coming up. So while you haven't seen that reflected in raw material graphite prices at the moment, which are a whole mixture of, there's a lot of flexibility in that supply chain from lots of different industrial purposes getting squished around. So you've got natural, synthetic for thousands of different uses. So there's some flexibility in how things move around. It looks like it's tightening up. And the third point here is about the graphite export rules in China that came in early December last year. So we're only a few months into that starting to have an effect, and that coincided with the Chinese New Year and coincided with the traditional winter season in China, which stops a lot of the natural graphite mines. So you had some distortions, short-term distortions in the market from those things. We haven't got information that they've really clamped down hard on it, but it's going to be a bit interesting in the next few weeks as the Biden government in the US looks to impose tariffs or not, and also looks to grant exemptions for graphite anodes in the US to comply with the IRA Act for a little bit longer until new supply chains get set up. So either way, these are all tailwinds, right? So you're looking back on 23 as a terrible time when everything sort of got the whole world got recession. We had interest rates go up, it affected everything and everyone. You had a lot of overcapacity, squirt stuff onto the market, and you had super high lithium prices coming off, which acted as a proxy for sentiment in the sector. And it looks like that's bottomed out. We know that costs or prices being talked about by Chinese producers were at cost or below cost to try and get market share, and that's looking like no longer the case going forward. So there's looking like things we're coming out the other side. That's what the data says. Watch the media. The media stuff's a disaster. Anyway. So just to reintroduce yourself to the project we're going to talk about specifically, which is a mine and a concentrator to be built up near Vittangi in northern Sweden, and then trucking concentrate down to a refinery where it gets purified and shaped and coated. It's still Europe's highest grade and largest graphite resource. We have total resources over 70 million tonnes at just under 20% in the country, of which at Vittangi we've got 35 million tonnes at just under 24%. It's not only very high grade, it produces all of that graphite flake. All of that flake is fines, super fine battery size graphite of very high crystallinity, and it makes very high capacity batteries. So it makes as I'll maybe demonstrate later, some interesting stuff. So it's more like an anode mine than a graphite mine. It's not really a raw material story. And the other thing is we're not subject to shipping within Europe. We have direct road and rail access to the rest of Europe. And considering what's going on in the Suez and the Red Sea and the increase in shipping costs and the geopolitical risks, this is of great interest to various customers trying to make batteries for EVs and different sorts of electric powered vehicles and objects, should we say. So I guess big news during the quarter was finishing our front end engineering and design, or FEED study. It was pretty cool, fantastic work by the team, lots of detailed work. This is because the DFS was published in 21. It was timely to update this. And what they managed to do is we've continued to optimize a lot of equipment, streamlined a lot of the anode and purification machinery, consistent, not only R&D, but large-scale metallurgical work. The MET team's done a fantastic job. The engineering team did a fantastic job. Managed to reduce energy consumption by nearly a quarter across the whole project. That's the mine and the refinery combined. Major reduction in the footprint of the refinery, which will give us more room on that site to expand into. The capex for the project was revised upwards, but not by much compared to what most other projects not only in the sector, but across the entire industry have been suffering. So it was a very modest increase to high 500s euros now. And this also includes a lot of modifications where our output is specifically configured for various customers that we're working with on the offtakes and so forth. And during that process, we identified for significant expansion potential, not as per our NISCA expansion and our 100,000 tonne plus expansion plan, but actually within the initial plant design. So we've seen a few tweaks where we can have an increased output, but because that isn't defined to the we're working on that, how to publish that to you, but because of the way it's defined amongst the various JORC and ASX codes and so forth, then there were limitations on what we could say in the recent study. but that's been very good. So increased output potential from the initial 19,500 stage, that could be more from the existing footprint in every way, both the mining and the anode refinery, and then that still leaves our expansion plans, which I'll talk to you later as well. At the refinery, we also completed an agreement to expand our land potentially at the Luleå refinery site, which is the industrial park just outside of Luleå, which is where a lot of other industry is there. On the top left here, you can see the part of the coking plant, and that's the steel mill for SSAB, and you've got in the southwestern corner of this image, as it were, or bottom left, I should say, you've got the railway and the magnetite concentrate exporting facility of LKAB. So you can sort of see this land was actually cleared and developed. I don't know if it was in the 70s, might have been even earlier, and it's but yeah, never went ahead at the time, and so it's all been cleared before, and now it's actually set up as a municipal park for this industrial development. So yeah, we've been getting interest from customers that far exceed our ability to supply in different stages. So we've already started work on how much that can expand. And I know you might think that's all a bit premature, considering we haven't been able to get the initial stage, going as such. But in fact, this site is fully permitted and is shovel ready. We've already done some construction on the anode refinery site. And as you know, because things can be delayed and take time in Sweden, it makes sense to actually be lining up in parallel as many things as you can and clearing the way for them going forward. On the financing side of it, we defined during the quarter that we had this application in for a 70 million euro grant at an EU level, and we're seeking other types of state aid, which would be on top of the 60% debt gearing that we've already organised the consortium for, and the paperwork and everything for that is all at an advanced stage, waiting on, I guess, the mine, because it's integrated. So just by the way, that funding package on the debt and is for both the refinery and the mine, which is quite an achievement, frankly, to have groups like the EIB and other commercial banks that we have that are also getting involved in the new mines of Europe. So yeah, and then we're looking at that, what's the balance that's left? And as I've said for quite a few years, we don't intend doing all that in equity ourselves. It's just a financial term that we have to speak to, but we're after as much data as we can to fill that gap, and then we'll look at strategic partners as well. So all those processes are running in parallel all the time, and those strategic partners have now increased, I would say, from where previously they were cell makers or specific industrial conglomerates to, it's gone up to automotives and others that are getting involved, a bit like they did in the early days of lithium. But so yeah, so a lot of key partners working together there. Just a word on we mentioned about the recycling. So we signed a joint development agreement with a UK group called Altilium. Altilium doing some fantastic work with, they've got this contract with Nissan/Envision. So for their black mass and that they produce from their batteries is getting, they're extracting the metals from the black mass, and they're concentrating the carbon rich bit and have delivered that to us, and we've been testing that, and we're still working on that to make it commercial, but the early results are obviously good enough that we see a stream of this material being available. Essentially, the benefits of recycling, it's not that we're trying to set ourselves up just as a recycling tech biz, but you've got to think about the synergies with the rest of the industry, right? So you've got government regulations on how much recycling is required to be brought back to the battery companies, but also the automotive companies. So there's responsibilities of these manufacturers to take in used batteries, and they also have to do with the scrap. So when you're making batteries, you get large amounts of scrap produced. So that's, as you can see in the background here, this is an anode that it's an unused anode. It's just it's a test sample, and I've just scraped some of the anode coating off that. So you can see it, and you've got the current copper. Sorry, guys. the current collector, which is made of copper underneath it. Sorry, there's always too many parallel things. So anyway, so that material hasn't been lithiated, so it hasn't been used. It's quite high in copper, but the graphite purity is very, very high, and it's already small particles, and they're already shaped, etc. Although they've been crushed through the coloring process, so they do lose shape. That material is not so difficult to work with. Frankly, it does have binders and other stuff in it, so there is some tech you've got to do in purification to handle that. Secondarily, black mass is getting the metals extracted. They want the lithium, the nickel, the cobalt, stuff like that from it. And they don't know what to do with the carbon, and no one can buy it because it's too contaminated with all these other metals and oxides and things. So our existing purification tech and our existing coating tech, we've been trialing, tweaking that to use on these black mass supplies, and it works. And we've been getting some really good results. And we've talked about using this material in our silicon anodes, but it looks like it can also be blended in to puff up the volumes of graphite anodes as well. And so there's a bit of a tug from government, from customers who want this, customers being cell companies, but also mainly autos. So, and then there's the benefit of these black mass collection points. They might want to get rid of the material very cheaply, hopefully for free. But anyway, or even you can be paid to take it away rather than going to landfill. You can have local sites doing it, so you don't have shipping, you don't have other issues with getting hold of this material. And because it dovetails into our existing plant designs, you could have actually these in different parts of the world. And so it can be a pretty good growth part of our business. Importantly, let's move on from there for a sec. So this is where it fits in the system, okay? So imagine you've got battery production here in the bottom right, goes into cars and it gets used. Or you have production scrap, which is going to the left there off to metal purification. So you have someone that can take that purified, the production scrap, and they smelt the heck out of it, or you can put it through a hydromet process, and they're just trying to get metals out. If it's a used battery, they crush it up or chop it up. They normally form a flotation of either the entire mass, or they form different chemical compounds, liquids and so forth, and they try and extract metals from them. And at the end of the day, they'll have something with a lot of leftover carbon in it, and they don't really get that out. So both of those streams can go into our graphite purification process. And then we can coat that material and we can sell it back into, or blend it back into, battery production. Now, how can we do that compared to everyone else? How come everyone else isn't doing it? A, because they think there's probably no money in it. B, the main issue is we've got technology for working on small stuff, on small particles. So just think about it. When you start with rocks, with graphite, and they're quite large, or synthetic graphite, it's quite large, it's going to be crushed down. By the time it ends up in the battery, it's smaller than 20 microns. Now, a lot of it's 10 microns and smaller, actually. So a lot of that material is broken down into super small particles. Now, that's too small to form a flotation concentrate easily for a lot of technologies. So it's not common for your normal flotation concentrate type plants and stuff to be able to collect such small particles and then to handle them in a purification process, which normally needs larger things, pelletizing or agglomeration, things like that. Ours doesn't need that. We've been working with small particles for a long time. We specialize in it. And so all of our technology is based towards that. And so we're able to, it dovetails into what our existing designs, engineering, and understanding and our skills already are. So it's a bit more advantageous for Talga to do it compared to others. And I think with what we're seeing behind the scenes with demand from customers and regulators and stuff, it's quite significant opportunity for just having an optimal blend and finding a lot of flexibility in new supplies. And of course, it'll only be done if it's wildly economic, but that's what we're working on. We also announced during the quarter, we put in some information about that we've made a new graphene product. We've actually been working on it for a couple of years in collaboration with our customer, who's can't be named at the moment. It's a global leading player in what it makes, these rubber products, very, very large volume products. And not only that, the rubber market itself is very, very large. It goes everything from rubber belts to car tires to seals, gaskets, and of course hoses. So there's all sorts of large volume applications, and a lot of those things you've got are black because they have carbon black in them. Carbon black is a lot of the ways to make it. They're very small particles. They form quite profitable businesses for groups like Imerys and lots of others, and they're really super small and they add all sorts of properties, but they do have a really high CO2 emissions signature normally. So our materials got a very low CO2, and of course our graphene type materials are able to produce other aspects of, shall we say, strength or conductivity or flexibility or longevity that some of these customers want. We've started selling some of the material at small scale. Can't say much about it, but it's a really good sign that we're able to actually have regular sales plan now with these people. Just to point out, congrats to our teams in Rudolstadt, Germany, where on the right here you can see one of our bits of tech in our graphene plant, which is running there. That's one of our nanomaterial concentrators that we developed many years ago and is still operating there, and also our R&D team in Cambridge. So just to point out for those shareholders that maybe joined us originally for graphene products and are still interested in them, it isn't our main focus, admittedly, while we're doing battery materials and much more short-term financeable things. At the same time, we still retain our optionality and retain the upside from our investments in this area over time, so that we can, and if there's a breakthrough in that area, then it can really go somewhere and the margins can be considerable. So yeah, we don't rest on our laurels there. Just wrapping up a little bit, just to mention too that the graphite deposit itself is still all open from the current resource. We still want to conduct it. We are doing some exploration and we'd like to do a lot more towards essentially converting the exploration target that's there, which is about 170 to 200 million tonnes. We're doing some work on that, which we'll talk to you about soon, and also then converting that back into resources if possible, to sort of basically define once and for all exactly what is the endowment of this graphite project. It's very high grade. Now, I believe it's probably the greatest graphite or natural source of graphite in the world, based not only on its grade and its scale, but the fact that the particles themselves are uniquely able to form extremely high amounts of anode per tonne, much higher than anything else I can find in the world. Secondarily, we have mentioned the lithium project that we own there. We have expanded that recently. Some interesting news coming out from also some battery customers about their lithium needs going forward, that they're starting to pick up again. It looks like lithium, there could be some really upwards price pressure on that soon, I think. But anyway, we've been engaged with strategic partners and potentially coming into that project, and that's been progressing, which is great to see. And we're interested in continuing to divest our copper gold projects, which is Kiskama, which is the largest cobalt resource, I believe, still in Sweden, which is an IOCG looking copper, cobalt and gold project, and also Lautakoski as well, which is quite a large grassroots but extremely prospective project. So yeah, we'll continue cleaning those up and getting as much value as we can out of them. First on the lithium, then the copper afterwards. Just want a word on the team, some changes in the team recently, particularly Marty, our CEO now, Melissa, our CFO, doing a great job, of course, as always, but I wanted to introduce Per-Inge Cruz in particular. He's our new Director of Business Development and Strategic Alliances. Per-Inge has worked previously in the automotive industry for FEV, Ricardo, Volvo, others. So he's Swedish-based, but he's not very often there now. He's flying around a lot for us. So yeah, just increasing commercial potential over there and globally. And also Anna Motta, who's now our CTO, where she's continued to lead our team in R&D and going on into more commercial matters as well. So Anna's doing a fantastic job. Of course, I've just mentioned Peter and Eva as well. Eva in our HR department, which has been growing very fast. And Peter, who's been a massive part of our permitting success over the years, which has been successful. We actually are permitted. We have got approval for our environmental permit for our mine. We're just going through the appeals process, which I'll talk about a lot more detail in our question time. So I think that's enough time for the presentation. We have some of our corporate officers there, of course, at the back, if anyone's around and needs to get in touch with anyone. And at this point, I should stop and throw back to Alex for any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, for the presentation and updating everyone on the group's activities. So, yep, as Mark says, we're now going to move on to the Q&A portion of today's session. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question ahead of time or through the Q&A function on Zoom. Mark, so first question, what is the status of the Supreme Court appeal for the mine environmental permit?
Yeah, it's been a very frustrating subject. Obviously, it was very hard to talk about as well because it's not just like a government department. It's the Supreme Court of the country. So you've got you should be very respectful and careful about what you say and what you do. But the bottom line is this is the process, right? We're not. There's a process in Sweden where you're allowed to appeal things, and it ends up in the Supreme Court, and where they decide on whether that appeal is accepted or not. They're not discussing our case. What's the status? We, as far as I know, obviously we haven't had a decision, and we won't get notified of a decision beforehand or not. So we've been waiting for the amount of time that has been suggested the process should take. That process of time, or as suggested by them in their public documents, has now been passed. And what we understand is that they have not actually reached our case, that there's a backlog. So they haven't been all this time working on our case. They actually haven't reached it because they work on cases before ours. They take them in order of how they're received. And there are specific judges that work on specific mining cases or environmental laws and things like that. So if there's any issue with resourcing and those judges are not available for some reason, or they're already there's less of them than normal, then things can be delayed. So we're now reviewing. We have written to the court. We're waiting on some responses, and we're also reviewing next steps that we can take. There is a process that is possible now to essentially request the court for a push-up in the line. It isn't available until now because you had to go past the time that was reasonable. And so we're looking at that now. So we're doing everything we can in a way that suits the process and what's available to us at any given time. So yeah, so we're all frustrated. You can't, it's hard for people to believe that the process works this way. However, it is a process. It's not due to a conflict of our project as such. So it is free to lodge appeals in Sweden against any sort of decision, and it can end up in the Supreme Court at basically no cost and no risk to anyone, and that's their system. And it's caused a lot of delays. They've been well known for a long time, for many years, for decades, in fact, and we're going through it now. Likewise, there are also processes for us to take, and they're not really particularly special. It doesn't mean that we just make them up and try it. It's actually legislated what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. So we're going through the process. It's a matter of time. And that's just what we have to cope with. But there's no reason to expect anything other than than positive results. But we just can't be sure. We can't be sure of timing right now, unfortunately. So we still have to cope with that. But we do think it's a matter of time. Of course, it's a matter of time. So there's going to be a decision. Remember, we've already been through years and years of the developments, everything from the first drill hole, the first rock chip, all the way through to the plans, excruciating amounts of high quality work with everything from the environmental plan, the mining plans, the economic plans. And it's coming into the time when the market itself continues to grow. Pressures continue to grow on having an anode supply chain built in Europe and or America. And so the timing's still coming together for that. So yes, I know it's excruciating for you as shareholders. It's excruciating for us and all of our staff, but we just have to handle it the most professional way we can. And that's by working with the system that exists there to get the result, which we've been successful at when you look at the environmental permit and look at the other things that have happened. Hopefully that's helps a little bit. That's all we can do right now. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Just staying with permitting for the moment. In the quarterly, you referred to planning injunction. Can you tell us anything more about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that you need to do to build the project, construct the mine, is the land has to be rezoned. to industrial land from whether it was forestry or something else or wasn't even zoned at all. So we've obviously purchased some land. We've got some various land deals in, but to actually, before you can build, you basically need a building permit. So the municipality is responsible for that. They're supposed to create what's a detailed plan. In this case, we pretty much developed the detailed plan and gave it to them and worked in with them and gave them everything we could. We've been working with them for many years on this. And if there's basically delays of if they do not complete things in a what would be called a timely fashion in a reasonable way, there is a process where you ask the government for an injunction and they will do it instead. So instead of us directing the municipality, now the government will direct the municipality about it. So they're taking on more responsibility for it. So that's the national government instead of the local government. There are obviously people in the municipality who, for personal reasons or political reasons, have tried delaying things and squeezing things. But we've given them every chance, and now is the time to go ahead with the other processes that are available to us to advance it. So at the end of the day, the government can decide, because the whole process is really designed around what's good for Sweden, which is taken into account of by the courts and the government to decide what is the best thing for everyone, not just maybe someone that's got a local beef within the municipality. So anyway, we expect that process to be one of months, not years, and we'll see. And there's a few things like that have to be done in Sweden. So yeah, we're continuing to do everything we can to expedite things, and that's one of them. And as I said, we've got one up and running now with the Supreme Court as well. And if anything else comes up, we'll take the same responses.
Thanks, Mark. Changing tack a little to product side, can you outline Talga's potential or expected market share for Talnode-Si?
Not exactly a market share, but I can tell you that it's an exciting area, obviously. So Talnode-Si is our silicon anode product. So it's about 50% silicon, 50% graphite/graphene in our product. And then you sell that as an additive and they can water it down, or you can blend it with something else to make whatever they want. And it just boosts the energy density. So standard battery anodes at the moment, high quality ones are about 350, 360 milliamp hours per gram. And this stuff can run up to about 1800, 1900 milliamp hours per gram. So about 5 times the energy density of batteries today. Currently, this sort of material is being sold into various batteries and various groups around the world. The markets are large and growing for additives into graphite anodes to continue boosting their energy. I would say that because of our modular plant design, so we've got a plant that can just once you've designed it, you basically, if you want to expand it, you just build another one next to it, flop it over, and they can share the same purification circuit and so forth. So we can expand it not only on the sites we're interested in, but anywhere in the world. So it's decoupled from having to be anywhere in particular. It's just down to the economics of it. Our economics are very good. We look like we've got a commercially competitive product with China, which has been our target, meaning that our inputs, our energy use, the capex, everything involved, on the OPEX side is very, very competitive. On the capex side, actually the capex per margin is really, really good as well. So once we decide a site, there'll be, and the customers that we're working with as well, then we'll be able to bring something out to light on that. So we're progressing a lot of things behind the scenes on that. We'll just have to update you as it comes about. But I guess importantly, we believe we've come up with a really mass scalable, super competitive price, good performance product that could be competitive anywhere in the world. And we've just been careful how we bring it out. We want to underwrite it already. We've been very close to getting actually some finance and some deals that weren't quite able to come off in the way we wanted. And now the world is changing a little bit insofar as you've got things like potential changes with the IRA in the States, and you've also got things happening in the European union, where you've got the new Critical Raw Materials Act going into being right now, and you've got strategic projects. Yeah, you're on the verge of a lot of financial and regulatory opportunities that didn't exist before. So all of those are to be looked at carefully as part of that. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. Like, I think it's a world-class opportunity. So sorry, I can't tell you about market share, but I can tell you it's a classic. It's a product that you can just go straight into feasibility studies being published on how good it will be economically.
Great. Can you just clarify, do we have to use Vittangi graphite in the production of Talnode-Si?
It doesn't have to be fed graphite from our own mine, no. We have previously mentioned that some recycled material can go in there, which can help buff it up. And also, because of the way we construct the shells and the structures of that's a multi-layer silicon graphite particle. We have done experiments and worked with other graphite sources as well. So no, it could be. It does not have to come from that. It could be more of a standalone. I think the options are to look at. Depends on where the refinery is going to be. So if it was somewhere, you can either put it somewhere close to where the silicon part comes from, or where graphite's coming from, whether it's coming from recycled material, our mine, if it's within Europe. But for example, if you built a silicon plant in America, would you bother feeding it our stuff, or would you buy material from someone else, or is there someone you can do a deal with to get recycled and graphite inputs that are decoupled from our Europe, because Europe's going to be flat out providing all the material for customers there. So no, it can have its own life basically, which is part of the excitement for it.
Great. Staying with the product, the recycled anode product obviously looks really promising, but do you see any risk in cannibalizing the current project?
Nah, the overall volumes required now, like the overall volumes now heading into millions and millions of tons, and the recycling industry currently produces no graphite component at all. So no, the industry is outgrowing the amount of recycled material that's available. Also, you still will have losses in that. You'll have losses at the concentration stage from the customer or from the black mass provider. You'll also have losses in the purification stages as well. So you don't capture all of it. So it doesn't all recycle like perfectly. There'll be some of it that doesn't work, etc. So no, I don't see the recycled material as cannibalizing existing and future graphite anodes.
Great. Just looking further afield from the Vittangi project, as you discussed in the presentation, can you speak to any further expansion plans?
Okay, so the first stage is 19,500. I've alluded to you that we can improve on that even in the first stage. The second stage was Niska. The Niska was seen as a separate series of some pits with underground development as well, and that you would have separate mills on that. And so when that's all permitted and done, there's already exploitation permits in for that. Then that would expand anode production to about 100 to 105,000 tons of anode. So that would be what we'd call stage 2. I guess the outlook is, it's very customer driven. But the bottom line is that this is an amazing resource that I've long wanted to explore fully what its boundaries are. It's open at depth and it's open along strike. All the resources are open. We've often I've talked for years about how we've just drilled out enough for our immediate marketing purposes, or the needs of the market, I should say. So, but the needs of the market. So back originally, we started 20,000 tons would be an introduction. 100,000 tons was wildly too big. Now 100,000 tons of anode is actually still too small. Do you need 500,000? What size do you need? Well, the market's growing into the millions of tons of anode required. Right, it's heading towards probably 3 won't be that long before you're at 3 million tons of anode just by itself, separate to the other graphite markets, right? So what we should do, in my opinion, is look at what would be called, say, stage 3, which is let's define what's there in its entirety. So you know what the total is, and let's explore the potential of that more from the ground up rather than from the market down. So I guess at this stage, all I can do is tell you, go look at our exploration targets and resources and imagine what they can do. Of course, there'll be boundaries. There'll be boundaries to do with power, water, roads, all sorts of things. But maybe there's some local infrastructure. It'll very much, that'll be such a big project that'll definitely be having strategic partners in, I would say. You won't be able to, I don't think, you wouldn't attempt that out of even early cash flow. We've suffered long enough. I want to get cash back to shareholders, not necessarily into, continued growth for 10 years. But we will grow for 10 years, but we want to offset some of that with strategic investment. And you'll need it and you'll want it. So yeah, there's fantastic potential. So we're doing a lot of work on that. We're developing up new models for what that can be. And we're looking at all the skills in that area as well. When you look at the Kiruna area, they currently mine about roughly 20 plus million tons of iron ore from underground. When you look at their ore body, it's about 80 meters wide, it's 4 k's long. What's our deposit? It's 20 to 80 meters wide, it's 15 kilometers long. A lot of the ways you would go about bulk mining at low cost that wouldn't make sense in other parts of the world could be done there. And the equipment's there, the skills there, the providers are there, the tech, the logistics is there. So all of that is being considered for where it can go. And I think it's time that we get back on the front foot about that sort of thing. I think we should stop hiding our light under a bushel and tiptoeing through the minefield of regulations and people's opinions and things that they'll pay attention to. Frankly, I know I'm sounding like maybe crazy founder here, but we should maximize our resources and have that out there and let the economics and the customers, the market, and the country itself, and dare I say all of Europe and the world, can judge the value of that. And I think it's a lot different to what it is today, where we're just copying this discounted view of one little part of our project rather than looking at the whole.
Great. Could you speak to the group's cash management strategy?
Okay, well, this might come about from the 2 quarters of cash remaining. So just for those of you investors that aren't aware of how those cash flow reports work, we have to put in the back of the quarterlies and stuff. They look at your cash burn rate of your previous quarter, and you are forced to take that number and just extend out what it looks like. So if you had a quarter where you're still paying, say Worley for a bunch of engineering work, or a bunch of local contractors in Sweden for starting the build of the refinery and doing all that, or cleaning up previous contracts, or even legal things to do with permits and stuff, those costs aren't necessarily going forward in the next quarter. So, but you have to project those sorts of things anyway. So no, we're taking a very prudent view that we should keep costs down at the moment, that we had to go late last year to develop as much as we could. Those costs are not ongoing. And so going forward, we've got as I said, a more prudent view, should you say. So we're doing some things to take care of our existing cash, in excess of what you can see in that cash flow statement, if that's where that's coming from.
Great. Next question. Obviously, we all know Talga Group's a fantastic company. So what steps is the company taking to protect itself from a takeover?
Yeah, some of that's natural. Okay, so some's management and some are actually naturally built into our business and who we are. So the first thing is, for quite a few years now, we've got quite a robust defense mechanisms, I guess. We've got processes in place how to handle various takeover things that may arise. So how to handle them. So we're prepared for those. Secondly, if you look at our share register, there's some natural buffers there insofar as myself and a lot of other, shall we say, friendly parties that believe in what we're doing for the long term are still there. Guys like, obviously it's Yandel, which is Mark Creasy, and some of our institutional investors like Pentwater, other large private holders like Anthony Holman and Graham Morton, guys like that. They're all they all didn't get into our business for what it looks like now. It's about where it's going. So I think there's a natural buffer there that would be very difficult. And third, we have all the skills. So there aren't many companies in the world that would be capable of doing what we do. There's not many Western companies that can actually make coated anode at this point. We've been doing it for several years. And yeah, there's a lot of tech in our business, a lot of know-how and a lot of skills in our people. So I think naturally this would not be a hostile position if something were to happen, put it that way.
Thanks. Just a step back over to the products. Just a clarification. Talnode-Si and or Talnode-Si, are they applicable to all the usual cathode chemistries, or are there any limitations in that area?
No, you can use them by themselves or blend them into whatever you want. So no, they're not chemistry dependent.
Great. On the same track, maybe. Can you give us your thoughts on niobium oxide as an alternative anode material, considering it does have advantages in fast charging and potential for lighter batteries?
I wonder where that's coming from. If that's guys from the carbonatite industry talking up niobium, or whether it's some of our other people we work with.
I just asked the questions.
Niobium is really interesting stuff, but it's expensive. It's actually a fairly poor conductor. It's got some different voltages it works at. There's a lot of really complex oxides you have to make it work. There's definitely a role for it. It's super stuff at what it does. It's really, really good. But I think it was first developed for batteries. They first started testing stuff back in the 50s. And so in 70 years, that it hasn't really led to any giant commercial outcomes, large scale. So it is good at super fast charging and all sorts of things like that. So I think there are companies working on really good modern versions of it, where it will suit smaller scale markets than what we work with, because graphite's cheaper, it's safer, it does most of the job, it suits a large range of voltages, and frankly, there's still a lot of innovation and high performance to get out of existing graphite anode batteries with silicon and with other additives we can put in them. Also, smaller size particles leads to faster charging. We previously have talked about one of our products which does 100% charge in 3 minutes. If you go back a few years, you can see some of our extreme work we did in that area. But the problem is, the faster you do things, normally the faster they break down, they last for less time, etc. So niobium will definitely have a place. But it's not going to be the large mass scale where it's just too expensive. Basically, will be the main problem with it. And while it has really high power, it's got low energy, so low energy density. So yeah, it's no, it's not a threat. In fact, you can probably use. I haven't done it. I believe someone else might have used some of that material, but you can have up to 20% graphite type coatings and carbon coatings with niobium to make them work and stuff. So. Like a lot of these things you'll either read about in the media or read about from non-scientists who work for, say, niobium prospectors or niobium-involved companies, there's pros and cons, and the commercial realities are it's not part of the multi-million-ton mass lithium-ion battery industry.
Thanks. We've had a few questions come in over the Q&A about strategic projects under the European Union's Critical Raw Materials Act. Could you speak to whether Talga will be applying for strategic project status under this legislation?
Yeah, I don't think it's violating any rules for me to say that we are going to apply for strategic project status. I think to be honest, it is actually it's a work in progress. It's only just opened in the last few days, the applications process for that, and so we're still digesting all of that. There's a lot of details to understand about whether things apply to mining versus non-mining, including the plant, and so the level of integration and having different maybe parts of the project in different places might change that might change the way that that's developed. But yep, of course, we're going to go for strategic project status and explore everything we can to gain some of the support that has been potentially lacking in Europe today. Seems like what's happening now with the Critical Raw Materials Act and some other acts coming in is that this is now the action part of what's been talked about for many years. And they finally passed the laws and now they're coming in. So we're yet to see exactly how effective everything will be, but it's better than nothing. And there's a lot of activity happening in this place really quickly. Maybe not quick enough for day traders, but quick enough for definitely quick enough for us to be very careful about what you commit to and where you commit to it, because you could just move one direction and something opens up in another area that would have been really good. Right now, we're into covering a lot of our bases. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how that can impact us.
Thanks. Are we approaching a US market listing?
Look, probably in time. I mean, we review listing opportunities in different jurisdictions all the time, but most parts of the world basically have failed over the years. London, even Canada, and so a lot of these places have pretty much failed. The spec market, got torched as well in the US. So I mean, a lot of these things are a bit faddish, and most people that go do them end up coming back later. The ASX has turned out to actually be a really, really good jurisdiction for a while. We particularly review European opportunities. However, it just doesn't add up yet. So we keep reviewing, and when it makes the right commercial sense, we will go there. I believe myself, just personally, this isn't necessarily a company view, that by the time that things get to the point where you would look at potentially any sort of European listing, it'll actually be too small for us. And you'll look at the US at that point as a much bigger player, and you'll have a choice of listing there, whether it's more on the tech side or whether it's just pure production side. So I think that's in our future at the right time, but not right now. It doesn't add anything until we have a lot more exposure to the US battery market through having operations there.
Thanks. Question came in over email about our electric vehicle anode facility, and maybe you can just help clarify. Do we sell the material from the facility to customers?
Yeah, but it's not designed as a commercial facility. It's an automotive qualification facility, so it's really just pre-commercial samples. So yeah, we do sell them, and we do sell some stuff to actual customers as well, actually. But yeah, it's not designed to be commercial scale. So the amounts are immaterial. You see them in our cash flow. Some of that's from probably going forward from graphene materials. All the rest of that stuff's from EVA type materials. Yeah, but it's just not material for our size right now until we're at commercial scale.
Great, thanks. Look, we're coming towards the end of the session, so just a few more questions. Can you speak to how many months it will take to reach first production within the Vittangi anode project?
Look, it's sort of pointless to speculate on timings from now, like from today, because we obviously are a little bit subject to getting line of sight derived from the Supreme Court decision. But as we've published, it's an 18 to 24 month build. So if the decision can come through relatively soon, then you're still looking at a 26 production start. If not, then it will spill over into 27. For me, sitting here in what feels like it's going to be soon closer to the middle of 24 than not. Either one of those is on the cards. But yeah, that's the amount of time it will take to build and start up, which dovetails in with our customers' wants, or essentially their changes to by around 27, 28 is when a lot of new regulations kick in on emissions restrictions on battery materials and things like that in Europe, and also a lot of new factories that take several years to build as well, and they're the new customers that will be buying from new anode producers like Talga.
Great, thanks. So last question. We've had someone ask about the graphite car, which eagle-eyed viewers will be able to see over your shoulder on the windowsill. Could you just tell us a little bit about how that beautiful object came to be sitting on your windowsill?
Oh yeah, let's clear this up, right? It's not, yeah, you don't exactly need eagle eyes, obviously. It's there for the ore. It's not for the it's not the fact of what the car is. It's not trying to be some great commercial thing. As you can see in my background, I've got jet engines, I've got pistons from Formula One cars, I've got also, we've got things to inspire thoughts about the entire, the industrial revolution, all the way through to the modern age, the various stages of internal combustion engines through to what will be chemical storage of power and transport. The graphite car came about because our ore is really different. So some people may not realize, but traditionally in the days of yore, graphite mines would actually carve their ore into like little shapes to give away as gifts, as mementos from their mine. So, for example, in Sri Lanka, they would carve a little elephant. You can find little graphite elephants and things like that. And it's a bit of an old tradition. And same thing in Germany, they do it too there from Krufnel. And so we sort of talked about doing the same thing. What would it be? What would be our little graphite widget? And from the early days, recognizing that ore was really special compared to everyone else's. Like I've actually got bunches of rocks, around. So this is our graphite ore, and here's graphite ore from China. This is from Heilongjiang. Don't know, but this is our 25% graphite grade, and that's 10%. So that's normal flaky graphite. Ours is microcrystalline graphite, and you compare that to, here's an East African one. That's East Africa, large flakes. And here's Ukraine. So these are places I've been to and sampled, material myself. This is Ukraine graphite ore from Zavolosky, where I went back in just before the war started. I was there sampling it and having a look. And so our stuff's a bit different, and you can actually carve it like straight out of the ground into different objects, and you can CNC machine it. And one day, a guy that was actually the artist for making those giant balls, the 7-ton graphite ball you've seen that's owned by a shareholder of ours, he said, "Do you guys want me to use the offcuts to carve something for you?" And we just didn't know what. So he said, "How about an electric car?" I said, "Sure." So he sent those back. So we've got a range of, so yes, they are Tesla Model S's, I believe, is what he's based the shape on, but he's just designing it to be, because that was an electric car shape. He's got a 6-axis milling machine that he makes things with. So no, it's actually, we're really trying to show off that the rock itself, the ore itself, is quite uniquely built. It's this mix of graphite and silica. That's quite special. That's what we're trying to show. We don't need to, you can imagine we've got some sort of commercial contact with lots of car companies and lots of battery companies over time, and that we can't talk too much about, and there's no point flashing the odd thing around the office. It's just, they're just objects that we like to promote that were a bit different, and actually because we're really passionate about it. All of our offices have got one, and they've got, some of them have got the balls as well, and we've got all sorts of stuff we like to make out of them for people to see and try and understand the difference between our resources versus other people's. And then that leads into, well, how do you process it differently? What are the challenges of that? What are the innovations you took to make that stuff, turn into a battery anode? And that's at the heart of that decision. So that's where it's from.
Okay, great, thanks. Just so you know, Mark, the Q&A's just started blowing up, where people are asking where they can get their hands on a carved Vittangi graphite object. At the moment, that's not necessarily possible, but if keep an eye on the events, the Australian events that we have, because people who come along to those can more often than not see the car themselves and try and pick it up and see how heavy it is.
Yeah, it surprises a lot of people to see this stuff in real life, and we always do take other samples to conversation and help understanding there is all this stuff. And frankly, over the year, I wanted to publish that much about it to retain advantages in what our approach is and some of our strategies, but maybe we can open up a bit more. I'll get in trouble for, I personally would love to make a little widget and have every shareholder have access to having a little piece of this ore body, which frankly they own. So I'd love to do that. We're just trying to work out how to do it economically. It's not really the main game of our business right now, right? But when we have the opportunity, if we get it done cheap enough, we'll try and work something out. I'll try and get something for you. Just give us some more time on that.
All right, watch this space. All right, we're at the end of our session. That's all the time we have for today. So thank you, Mark, for your presentation and time answering some tough questions. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and keep an eye out for our next investor webinar.
Thanks, Alex. Cheers.